Tom Bower has spent roughly 4 decades writing about the most powerful people on Earth. His subjects almost never sue him because what he prints tends to hold up. And this week, he sat down and chose the single ugliest word in the entire royal vocabulary. He attached it directly to Prince Harry. Not disappointing, not difficult, not even destructive, poison. That was his word. Poison for the institution itself. And I want you to hold that word in your mind for the next 30 minutes. Because by the time we reach the end of this story, you will understand exactly why a growing number of voices inside and around Buckingham Palace are arriving at the same conclusion from completely different directions, using completely different sources, and landing on language that would have been unthinkable even 2 years ago. But here's the part that genuinely unsettles me. The reason that particular word landed with the force it apparently did has almost nothing to do with Prince Harry himself. It has everything to do with what happened to a gift. A gift so rare and so personal that most human beings will never once be offered anything remotely like it in their entire lives. And what reportedly happened to that gift within roughly 14 days tells you more about the actual state of the House of Windsor than any official statement or carefully staged photograph ever could. Let me set the scene properly, because the context here matters more than any single headline. King Charles III is 77 years old. He is actively undergoing cancer treatment. He is running the full operational weight of the British monarchy while managing a serious illness that would have most people stepping back from public life entirely. And sometime in late spring of 2025, this man did something that virtually nobody covering the royal family expected him to do. Not the tabloid reporters, not the broadsheet correspondents, not the veteran biographers who have spent their entire careers tracking every handshake and every diary entry that flows through the palace. Charles opened the doors of Highgrove House, his private residence in Gloucestershire, the one place on earth where he reportedly feels most safe and most himself, and he sat down with Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, and the 2 grandchildren he had barely been permitted to see for almost 4 full years. Stop and feel the weight of that for a moment. Archie and Lilibet, 2 children whose grandfather happens to be the King of England. 2 children he had not laid eyes on since the Platinum Jubilee back in June of 2022. 4 years, 1,460 days, give or take. An entire phase of childhood he missed completely. First words he never heard, first steps he only saw in photographs, if he saw them at all. And now, despite everything that had happened between the palace and the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, despite the interviews, despite the memoir, despite the Netflix series, despite years of public accusations that had done measurable damage to the reputation of the monarchy, Charles reached out. One more time, one final extended hand. Queen Camilla was present for the entire visit. Roughly an hour together, according to multiple accounts. No cameras, no official statement from the palace press office, no curated social media rollout. And one single condition attached to the entire afternoon: keep it private. Here is a detail worth sitting with, because it tells you something about who actually controlled the initial narrative. According to reporting from a major British news outlet, the information that this meeting had taken place came from inside the palace itself, from Charles's own staff, not from the Sussex side. Charles reportedly wanted this specific gesture known publicly, but on his own terms and in his own time. The arrival itself was handled with a level of secrecy that multiple people who follow this family closely described as genuinely unusual. The family was reportedly driven in through the rear of the estate in a vehicle with blacked-out windows. The visit was apparently framed, for anyone on the grounds who might notice, as simply a group touring the gardens. Think about that. A king arranging a private visit with his own son and grandchildren, and the operational security around it looked more like a diplomatic meeting with a foreign head of state than a family tea. A former royal butler who served the household for years reportedly described the meeting as something close to a genuine coup for Prince Harry specifically. His reasoning was straightforward. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex needed this moment considerably more than King Charles did. That tracks with what Tom Bower has maintained for months. Being seen alongside the king, being what he called revalidated as royals, carries more value for the Sussex brand than any single commercial deal or streaming contract could ever deliver. A separate commentator summarized the underlying dynamic in one blunt word: desperate. So the door opened. The grandchildren reportedly spent an afternoon in the gardens at Highgrove House. The king got his visit with the family he had been separated from for years. And for a genuine moment, plenty of people watching this story, including plenty who have grown genuinely exhausted by the ongoing conflict, allowed themselves to believe that this particular family had actually turned a real corner towards something better, toward healing, toward quiet reconciliation. The one rule was simple: keep it private, which is exactly why what happened next generated the reaction it did. And this is where the story stops being about tea and starts being about trust. Stay with me here, because the next detail changes everything. Within days of that private afternoon at Highgrove House, a considerably softer, more sympathetic account of the reunion reportedly appeared in People magazine and the New York Times, two of the largest publications in the United States. The framing across both pieces positioned Meghan Markle as the wounded party throughout. The underlying blame for years of estrangement was quietly but unmistakably redirected away from the Sussexes and toward Prince William specifically. Two major American publications running warmly framed pieces the very same week pointed in the very same direction with the very same emotional architecture. That is the kind of coincidence that invites real scrutiny rather than casual acceptance. Now, I want to be precise here, because precision matters when you are talking about something this serious. We know from previous reporting that Prince Harry has, in the past, directly communicated with People magazine. We know that People magazine has functioned by the assessment of multiple royal correspondence as something close to a house journal for the Sussex operation. We know that Meghan Markle reportedly wanted it publicly understood that the choreography of this meeting, the logistics and the timing, had nothing to do with her. That particular detail is interesting on its own. Why would someone feel the need to distance themselves from the choreography of a family reunion unless they anticipated that the choreography itself might eventually become the story? One generally measured biographer, someone who is not known for sensationalism or for picking fights, used a single word to describe what he believed had actually happened to that private afternoon. He called it a currency. Nobody simply treasured that moment quietly. By his reading, someone converted it into something else entirely. When a king hands you the most private hour of his entire year, the rarest and most personal gesture available to a man in his position, and that hour becomes a sympathetic headline paired with a fresh criticism of your own brother within days, that is a genuinely significant thing to have happened. A veteran royal author reportedly said he had expected the information to become public from the moment the visit was arranged, simply a matter of time in his assessment. He added that the Duchess of Sussex tends to consistently position herself as the injured party in these situations, regardless of the specific circumstances involved. Another commentator reached for a line that I think captures the broader palace mood more accurately than any diplomatic language could. You cannot do business with these people. 6 words. And the number of people inside and adjacent to the palace who are reportedly using some variation of that exact phrase has grown noticeably over the past several months. But I want to be fair here, because fairness is what separates analysis from propaganda, and I am not interested in propaganda. Before we move any further, the counter-explanation deserves genuine consideration. Not every leak necessarily traces back deliberately to one side. Palace staff talk, sometimes for entirely different reasons than commercial or reputational strategy. Genuine excitement about good news. Competitive relationships between different press offices inside the same institution. Simple carelessness in an environment where dozens of people had knowledge of the visit. It is entirely possible that the specific sourcing behind those American publications is more complicated than a single deliberate briefing from the Sussex camp. Even though the resulting framing clearly benefited one side of this story considerably more than the other, hold that tension honestly. Both things can be true at the same time. The pattern can look damning while the specific mechanics remain genuinely uncertain. But here is the part most people following this story have completely missed, and this is where everything shifts. because the reunion did not just generate embarrassment. It quietly and significantly destroyed one of the central public arguments the Sussexes have relied on for the better part of 6 years. For 6 years, the consistent explanation for why Prince Harry could not bring his family to Britain has centered on safety, insufficient police protection, genuine danger, unacceptable risk. That has been the wall that every conversation about a potential return to the United Kingdom has run into, every single time. Harry pursued it through the courts. He made it a centerpiece of his public narrative. The message was clear and it was consistent. I want to come home. I cannot come home. The country I was born in is too dangerous for my wife and my children without the level of security we have been denied. And then Meghan reportedly walked into Britain with both children, spent a quiet afternoon at Highgrove House, and left again. No incident, no drama, no threatening crowds, no security breach. Not even a stray photograph from a passerby. In and out, without any apparent trouble at all. Think about what that single quiet afternoon did to 6 years of careful, deliberate public positioning, 6 years of legal arguments, 6 years of interviews where the word safety was repeated like a mantra. A former royal butler, who knows the security arrangements at Highgrove House, intimately reportedly noticed the contradiction immediately. If the danger was real, how did they manage it so easily? A veteran royal author has reportedly stated plainly that intelligence assessments show no significant credible threat against Prince Harry specifically, not elevated risk, not moderate concern. No significant credible threat. Another commentator reached for a considerably sharper phrase, describing the entire security argument as functioning, by this reading, closer to a convenient justification than a genuine constraint. And there is a broader comparison worth including because it puts the whole thing in proportion. Princess Anne, the king's sister, moves through public life regularly without the kind of extensive personal security detail Harry has reportedly requested. Prince William, the heir to the throne, the man who will one day wear the crown, does not travel day to day with a presidential-level motorcade. Nobody is demanding that level of protection for the Princess Royal when she opens a hospital wing in Derbyshire. If that comparison holds up, and multiple people who understand how royal protection actually works suggest that it does, then Prince Harry was seeking a level of security that even the future King of England does not typically receive. Now, here is where I want to share my own reading of what Charles may have actually been doing, and I want to be transparent that this is analysis, not established fact. The former butler's specific interpretation of King Charles's motivation is worth including directly, because it reframes the entire visit. He described the king as essentially testing the Sussexes' actual sincerity, offering the meeting specifically on his own terms, at his own house, with no cameras, no press, no public event to hide behind, effectively asking one simple question: how genuinely do you want this reconciliation once all the usual conditions are stripped away? Charles reportedly feels safe and confident at Highgrove House specifically. It is his territory, his ground, his rules. And using that comfort to quietly expose a 6-year-old security argument that apparently did not hold up in practice is, by this reading, a genuinely calculated move on his part. Not cruelty, not pettiness. Strategy from a man who has spent his entire adult life understanding how institutions protect themselves. I find that reading persuasive. You may not, but the evidence, I think, points strongly in that direction. And if you are still following this thread, if the pattern I am laying out is starting to take shape in your mind, then the next section is the one you cannot afford to skip. Because what happened inside that room at Highgrove House tells you something far more disturbing than any leak ever could about the actual level of trust that remains within this family. This is the detail that genuinely stood out to me more than anything else in this entire story. And I think it reveals something that most coverage has either missed entirely or treated as a minor footnote when it deserves to be the headline. Queen Camilla attended that meeting. Multiple people who follow the royal family closely suggested she was not there purely for warmth. A veteran royal author reportedly described her presence in protective terms. She was there, by his account, essentially as a witness, there to ensure that an accurate record of what actually happened during that afternoon existed. Someone in the room whose version of events could be trusted if the details of the visit were later reshaped, reframed, or contradicted by a competing account in the press. I want you to sit with what that actually implies. Really let it settle. This is a 77-year-old man managing a serious illness. He is meeting grandchildren he has not seen in 4 years. Children who are young enough that they may not even clearly remember him. This should be, by every ordinary human measure, one of the most emotionally unguarded moments of his life. A grandfather on his knees in a garden with a small child. That is what this should look like. And instead, by this reading, King Charles apparently could not simply be present as a grandfather. He reportedly needed another person in the room, specifically so that no version of that afternoon could later be transformed into something it was not. Here's the connection that I think most people covering this story have completely failed to make, and this is my own analysis, so take it for what it is worth. What the palace reportedly constructed for this visit looks almost exactly like what diplomats call a verification protocol. In Cold War arms negotiations, neither side trusted the other enough to accept verbal assurances alone. So they built systems, inspectors, witnesses, documented records that both parties agreed were accurate. The entire architecture of nuclear arms control, from the Strategic Arms Limitation talks all the way through to the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, was built on a single foundational principle: trust but verify. You do not build verification systems for relationships where trust exists naturally. You build them precisely because trust has been broken so many times that the absence of verification is itself a risk. That is what I believe Camilla's presence at Highgrove House actually represents. Not a wife joining her husband for a family tea, a verification protocol, an institutional safeguard, a human recording device whose testimony would carry weight if the events of that afternoon were later disputed. And if you think I am reading too much into this, ask yourself one question. Can you name a single other occasion in the history of the modern British monarchy where a king reportedly needed a witness present at a private meeting with his own child? I cannot. And I have looked. Think about what years of leaked conversations, selectively quoted private moments, and carefully edited Netflix footage apparently does to trust within a family. If a father cannot sit down with his own son over tea without someone quietly present specifically to protect the accuracy of what happened afterward, that is not describing an ordinary family reunion. That is describing something that looks far more like a deposition than a homecoming. And whatever you personally make of King Charles, whatever criticisms you might have of the institution he leads, that level of caution did not develop by accident. It was built, brick by years of apparently broken confidences. A commentator who has covered this family for decades reportedly characterized Meghan Markle's reaction to not getting everything she had wanted from the visit as furious. I want to handle that specific characterization carefully and honestly. Describing someone as furious over not getting everything they requested is a strong personal judgment coming from one commentator's interpretation. It is not something independently verified through direct testimony or documentation, but let me tell you what I find striking about it. The reporting also indicated that there were specific conditions attached to the visit, including who was and who was not permitted in the room. Camilla was apparently on the excluded list initially. The fact that she attended regardless tells you something about who ultimately controlled the terms. It was not the Sussexes. And if the reported reaction to that loss of control was indeed fury, then what does that tell you about whether this was genuinely about family or about something else entirely? Now, there is a smaller detail from the same period that most people skipped right past, and I think it deserves far more attention than it received, because it illustrates the exact same pattern of broken trust, just in miniature. In the days leading up to this visit, King Charles had reportedly offered Prince Harry a room to stay in on royal property, Buckingham Palace itself, by some accounts. Think about what that offer actually means. A father saying to his son, "Stay under my roof, sleep in this house, be here, not in a hotel." A genuinely warm gesture from a man who had every reason to keep his distance. According to a respected royal correspondent at one of Britain's most established newspapers, Prince Harry reportedly declined that offer in writing. And then hours later, he changed his mind and tried to accept it. But by that point, the specific window had apparently already closed. That correspondent herself reportedly found the outcome somewhat harsh. She noted, fairly, that a father should generally be able to make room for his son regardless of an earlier decline. And on the surface, that sounds entirely reasonable. Of course a father should make room. Of course the door should stay open. But look at what that sequence actually reveals about the underlying trust level inside this family. If that household has genuinely been burned by leaked or reframed private moments enough times before, then the instant Harry declined, there may have been real institutional reluctance to leave that particular offer open indefinitely. Not because Charles did not want his son there, but because an open-ended standing offer to stay at Buckingham Palace is itself a piece of information. It has value. It can be quoted, it can be framed. It can become a headline that reads, "King offers Harry permanent room at palace," and suddenly the narrative shifts in a direction the palace did not authorize. Once the initial no arrived in writing, the safest institutional move was to close the window, not out of cruelty, out of learned caution. That same correspondent's broader assessment of the relationship with Prince William specifically was reportedly considerably darker. She described the rift as something William feels genuinely betrayed by, and not something she believes he is likely to move past. When one of the more measured, generally fair royal correspondents delivers that particular verdict, it suggests whatever ceiling exists on this reconciliation is a fairly low one. And the fact that William reportedly opposed the Highgrove meeting from the start tells you exactly where the heir to the throne currently stands. He is not interested in testing trust again. He has apparently already drawn his conclusion. Before I move into the next section, I want to say something directly. Because we are about to touch on the children specifically, Archie and Lilibet, and I believe that particular topic requires real caution rather than casual speculation, these are children who did not choose any part of this public conflict. They did not ask to be born into the House of Windsor. They did not ask for their parents to leave the institution. They did not ask for any of the years of headlines and accusations and counter-accusations that have defined their short lives so far. They deserve a level of protection from adult commentary that adults voluntarily entering a public dispute simply do not get to claim for themselves. I am not going to offer my own theory about their well-being or their experience of any of this. What I will do is tell you what several commentators actually said and let you form your own view, because what they said is genuinely uncomfortable. A senior magazine editor reportedly used the phrase "dangled like a carrot" to describe the dynamic around the children's presence at Highgrove House. She acknowledged herself, even as she said it, that the phrase sounded harsh, and then she stood by it as her genuine assessment of the situation. Her broader argument was that the reunion appeared to run substantially on Meghan Markle's terms throughout, access to Archie and Lilibet granted specifically when and how she chose to grant it. A veteran royal author reportedly went further, using considerably stronger language to describe what he saw as the strategic deployment of the children's presence at this particular moment. A commentator who has covered the family for decades reportedly framed the entire visit as a form of emotional pressure directed at an aging king facing a limited amount of remaining time. 3 separate commentators across separate platforms, working from separate sources, reportedly converging on the same deeply uncomfortable reading. Access to the grandchildren functioned as a form of emotional currency in this situation. The one asset the Sussexes held that the palace apparently wanted most. And the suggestion, stated or implied across multiple assessments, was that this asset was being deployed rather than simply shared. In fairness, and I mean that word sincerely, not every commentator agreed with that framing. One generally measured biographer reportedly pushed back specifically on this point, stating plainly that the children themselves had done nothing wrong, which is genuinely true. And it is worth holding in your mind throughout all of this. Those 2 children are entirely innocent, period, full stop. That is not in dispute. And that is precisely why, if the broader reading holds any accuracy at all, it is so genuinely uncomfortable to sit with. The 2 people most innocent in this entire situation would be the ones positioned even unintentionally, at its emotional center. Used in the harshest version of this reading as instruments in a negotiation they cannot possibly understand. But I want to offer a genuinely fair counter reading here too, because I think honesty requires it. It is entirely possible that Harry and Meghan wanted their children to know their grandfather for purely sentimental reasons. That the timing simply happened to align in a way that made the visit look strategically calculated to outside observers, regardless of the actual private reasoning behind it. Intent and perceived timing are not the same thing. A visit can look like a chess move from the outside while being motivated by nothing more complicated than a father wanting his kids to see their grandpa. I think that possibility deserves space even when the broader pattern looks concerning, because jumping from pattern to motive without evidence is exactly the kind of mistake that turns analysis into something uglier. Now, here is the detail that I think genuinely reveals the most, not about the palace specifically, not about the children, but about the actual state of the marriage underneath all of this. During that same general period, Prince Harry reportedly went through one of the most difficult professional weeks of his adult life. He lost his major court case against the publisher of the Daily Mail, comprehensively and publicly. This was a case Harry had invested years of effort, enormous legal fees, and a significant portion of his remaining public credibility into. He lost. Meghan Markle, by multiple accounts, was not anywhere near him during that stretch. She reportedly skipped events she had been expected to attend. She was apparently not photographed standing beside her husband at a moment when multiple newspapers were openly describing him as having lost badly. One commentator's read on that specific absence was blunt. She was, in his words, nowhere to be found during her husband's worst week. I want you to think about what that communicates, regardless of whatever private explanation might exist behind the scenes. Because in public life, especially royal public life, presence is a statement. Standing next to your partner during a bad week is not just emotional support, it is a signal. It says we are together. It says this loss is ours, not just his. It says the partnership holds even when things go wrong. In the absence of that signal, especially when it is noticeable enough for multiple commentators to remark on it independently, communicates something that is very hard to fully unhear once you have noticed it. You can dress a marriage in as much curated warmth as you like, coordinated outfits, practiced hand-holding for the cameras, synchronized statements released through representatives, but a spouse who is not standing beside their partner during a genuinely difficult public moment creates a gap that no amount of social media management can entirely fill. And this was not some minor scheduling conflict. This was, by any reasonable measure, one of the defining professional setbacks of Prince Harry's post-royal life. A senior editor had reportedly already identified a related motive underneath the broader pattern, suggesting that Meghan Markle wants both the institutional respectability that comes with royal association and the commercial value that still flows from remaining connected to the Windsor name, the title, the brand. Strip away the sentiment. Strip away the curated photographs and the sympathetic profiles in American magazines. And the reunion at Highgrove House starts looking, by this reading, considerably more transactional than purely emotional. And the ground underneath the broader Sussex operation is not especially stable right now, regardless of how any single visit gets framed publicly. Multiple commentators have noted that the commercial ventures that were supposed to fund their post-royal life have either ended or significantly underperformed. The Spotify deal ended. The Netflix relationship has produced diminishing returns. The memoir sales followed the pattern that most memoirs follow, a strong initial burst followed by a sharp decline. One commentator summarized the entire financial trajectory in 2 words: desperation and failure. Which brings us back to where we started, back to Tom Bower, back to that word he chose with full deliberation, and back to the question I promised you at the very beginning of this video I would answer before we were done. Let me lay out what I think is actually happening here, because I think the real story is not any single one of these details in isolation. It is the pattern they form when you put them together. A king offers his most private home for a family reunion. The reunion becomes a headline within days, framed to benefit the Sussex narrative at the expense of Prince William. A 6-year-old security argument, the primary public justification for staying away from Britain, is quietly demolished by the very visit it was supposed to prevent. The Queen Consort is reportedly brought into the room not as a grandmother but as a witness, in a configuration that resembles diplomatic trust verification more than family warmth. A room offered at Buckingham Palace is declined, then requested again too late, and the window closes because the institution apparently cannot afford to leave open-ended offers on the table anymore. The children's presence is read by multiple independent commentators as emotional currency being deployed strategically. And during the very week when Prince Harry needed visible spousal support most, Meghan Markle was reportedly absent. Each of these details, taken alone, has a plausible, innocent explanation. I have tried to present those explanations fairly because I think fairness is what separates genuine analysis from the kind of content that simply tells an audience what they already want to hear. But taken together, the pattern points in a direction that a growing number of people inside and around the palace are apparently no longer willing to look away from. Bower's specific verdict, stated plainly, is that Prince Harry should arguably be the one actively working to rebuild trust with Britain and with his own family, rather than simply being handed private reunions as though nothing over the past several years actually happened, as though the memoir did not name names, as though the interviews did not air, as though the Netflix cameras did not roll. He is not, by this reading, a man who has done the work of reconciliation. He is a man who has been offered reconciliation as a gift. And the gift was reportedly converted into a headline. There is an old principle in intelligence work that I think applies here, and this is the second connection I want to draw from outside the usual royal commentary space. In counterintelligence, analysts talk about the difference between a one-time incident and a pattern of behavior. A single piece of intelligence that suggests disloyalty might be a misunderstanding, a coincidence, a misread of ambiguous evidence. But when the same signature appears across multiple independent observations, across different time periods, from different sources, the professional assessment shifts. It stops being treated as a possible misunderstanding and starts being treated as an established behavioral pattern. What the palace appears to be doing right now, whether consciously or instinctively, is applying that exact analytical framework to the Sussexes. And the conclusion they are reportedly reaching is the one the biographer already stated out loud. So, let me pay off every thread I opened at the start of this story, because I promised you answers, not just questions. The gift? A 77-year-old king with cancer opened his private home to a son and daughter-in-law who had spent years publicly criticizing the institution he leads. He offered tea, gardens, time with grandchildren he had not seen in 4 years, and one simple request: keep it private. By multiple accounts, that request was not honored. The word poison, Bower chose it because he believes, and a growing number of commentators apparently agree, that every point of contact between the palace and the Sussexes now carries a risk of being converted into a public narrative that damages the institution. Not occasionally, not accidentally, systematically. The toxicity is not in the relationship itself. It is in what reportedly happens to every private moment once it leaves the room. Camilla's presence as a witness, that tells you the palace has learned, through what appears to be painful and repeated experience, that private conversations with the Duke and Duchess of Sussex cannot be trusted to remain private or to be accurately represented after the fact. The verification protocol is the institution's immune response to years of apparently broken trust. The security argument? It held for 6 years, and then one quiet afternoon at Highgrove House with 2 small children walking through a garden without incident apparently dismantled it entirely. The children? Whether their presence was genuinely motivated by family sentiment or strategically deployed as emotional currency depends on information that none of us, including the commentators I have cited, actually possess with certainty. But the pattern of behavior surrounding their appearance raises questions that deserve honest engagement rather than reflexive dismissal. And the marriage? I do not pretend to know what happens behind closed doors between 2 people I have never met. But the visible signals during Prince Harry's worst professional week were, at minimum, conspicuous. Presence is a choice, Absence is a choice. And the choice that was apparently made during that particular week was noticed by more people than I suspect the Duchess of Sussex intended. There is reportedly a fresh invitation already circulating for September, another room, another potential occasion, another possible opportunity for reconciliation. Tom Bower has not publicly endorsed it. And given everything I have just walked you through, it is genuinely fair to wonder whether another open door is wisdom or whether it is simply providing another opportunity for the same pattern to repeat itself. King Charles offered something considerably more valuable than money or titles or public platforms. He offered his time, his trust, his private home, and a door held open against what may have been considerable internal pressure from Prince William and others telling him to keep it firmly shut. And if even a portion of what I have described here holds up, that gift, a king's most personal and most private gesture, appears to have been converted within roughly 2 weeks into exactly the kind of headline it was specifically created to avoid. I will leave you with this. In every negotiation, diplomatic or personal, there is a concept called the last best offer. It is the final meaningful concession one side is willing to make before the terms fundamentally change, before the door does not just close but locks. I believe the Highgrove reunion may have been King Charles's last best offer to his youngest son. And the question that will define this family for years to come is whether Prince Harry understood that, or whether he and the people around him treated it as simply another card to play. What comes next, in September and beyond, will tell us which it was.